Hello and welcome to our first ever ESACH Talks 2023 event. My name is Samida, and as part of ESACH's coordination committee, I will be moderating this event tonight. Thank you all for joining us today. To kickstart our year, for today's talk, we have partnered up with Future for Religious Heritage and FRH Talks. We will get to hear from them shortly on today's topic, but before that, just a quick reminder that we will be recording this session. So if you don't wish to be viewed on online platforms, then please go ahead and turn off your camera. I would also request you to please mute your microphones during presentations. Now moving on, we will hear from Jordi Malak, Executive Officer of FRH, who will introduce us to today's topic. He couldn't be with us today due to his prior commitment, so his colleague Roshio will share her screen and play his pre-recorded message. Roshio, you can share the screen.
Dear participants, my name is Jordi Malak and I'm the Executive Officer at Future for Religious Heritage, the non-faith, non-for-profit European network working to safeguard Europe's religious heritage sites. We have over 80 member organizations and 200 individual members in 35 countries and are based in Brussels, where we raise the voice of our sector at the EU level. I would like to welcome you all to the joint FRH Talks and ESACH Talks titled Young Voices in Religious Heritage. A special thanks to Samida, who will moderate this panel discussion, and to the three young professionals who will share their insights in this very interesting field of study. Also, of course, many thanks to ESACH for partnering in this talk. We look forward to your fruitful exchanges, and remember that the FRH Network is always keen to showcase the work of young cultural heritage professionals in our various communication channels. For example, our monthly newsletter with a Europe-wide reach, which has the section Young Voices and Heritage and includes personal experiences, reflections, projects, etc. So feel free to share yours. Finally, I would like to invite all those interested to attend our upcoming FRH biannual conference titled European Sustainable Religious Heritage, which will take place on April 20 and 21st of 2023 in Lund, Sweden. Best wishes for the panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Roshio, and thanks to Jordi as well. Now for our talks, we are delighted to have three emerging heritage professionals with us on our panel. Each of them will be sharing their work with us and talk about some key issues, challenges, and their own perspectives on sustainability in religious heritage. After their presentations, I will ask them some follow-up questions which will give us more insight into their work. Then it will be followed by a question and answer session. Meanwhile, feel free to use the chat to write questions as you have them, but please remember to include the name of the speaker that you are addressing. Also, keep an eye on the chat throughout the event as we could use it to share links for more information. So without further delay, I would like to introduce our first panelist, Arpichat. He is an associate member of FRH and an alumnus of KU Leuven. Currently, he is working as a full-time associate consultant at Studio Lapis Conservation in Singapore, and he is also working as a part-time researcher for Catholic churches and communities in Singapore and Bangkok. Arpichat, you have the floor now. You can share the screen.
Okay, thank you so much, Samita. Let me share the screen. Okay, so everyone see my screen, right?
Yes.
I'm trying to make it full screen now. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for FRH and ESACH for the opportunity for me to share some of my experience. So my name is Abhishat. So I'm working at Studio Lapis Conservation now in Singapore. Today's discussion, I would like to talk about three parts. The first part is about the past. I would like to talk about like my past involvements and project in Belgium. So like in the three main cities, Antwerp, Bruges, and Leuven. And the present, I'm going to talk about my current project about church heritage in Bangkok and Singapore. And the future mainly is about like a transboundary. So we shall see what it's going to be about. So about the past, as you can see that like I first involved and got to know about the church heritage in Belgium in 2014. It was the Cathedral of Our Lady in Antwerp. So where I got to know the word preventive conservation the first time in my life. And then later on, like when I went to study at KU Leuven, I like had the opportunity to study and did a research at the Hofbadela. It's a group project that we like basically like went to the city of Bruges, and then we know that okay, this house, it was once like has been used as a Bank of Medici, and it's like was turned to a religious residence for sisters. And we were fortunate enough to be able to interview one of the last sisters of the house before they moved on later on in the 2020. And the third one is about the Great Beguinage of Leuven, which I was focusing on the outer wall of the Great Beguinage. So I will briefly talk about my thesis about the Great Beguinage of Leuven, a little bit about the past. Yeah, so it was a study that focusing actually just on the outer walls of the Great Beguinage. And then like you can see from the map in like 1598, right? That's like basically like it was the wall were exposed masonry before, but later on because of the maintenance activities of people in the like past centuries, that they lime washed the wall in the white color. But in 1960s, Professor Laurent, like he was involved with the restoration process. So that's why he proposed that, okay, the Great Beguinage of Leuven should be restored back to the original stage. But the thing is like the outer walls were the part that were not like really like thoroughly restored. Therefore, like we can see like remnants of the white lime wash on the wall. Therefore, like my research is actually like focusing on actually what are the conservation perspective of people and what are the condition and like what are we going to do with the current condition. That's why like I did some survey photogrammetry of the wall, and then we compare like the existing condition with the past, and then we did propose like predict on how the condition of the walls are going to be with or without like certain repair or maintenance activity. And one of the key process that I was used as a methodology of the research is about like if we are going to discuss about proposing maintenance and repair of the wall under the preventive conservation strategy and how it's going to be. So the result was like the diagram that you can see on the right side. So basically like conservation, right? And especially when we focus on preventive conservation is the never-ending process. So you cannot say that like once you restore the wall or you repair the wall, you will not need to do it in the future. No, it's not. So basically it's just like how we're going to maintain the wall and like as much as necessary actually. Yeah, so therefore like I classify like all the damages at the wall into like urgency of the conditions, like to serious, potential serious, minor, and then what are the actually just like maintenance activity that can maintain good condition of the wall. And then when we repair, then we can like scope down all the repair work until to just like a maintenance. And then it's a loop of the conservation and maintenance program that like we will just like focusing on maintaining good condition of the heritage. So that was my past research about the preventive conservation of the outer wall of the Great Beguinage Leuven. Nowadays I'm working as a consultant and like in like conservation of cultural heritage, but like as Samita had mentioned that like I did like part-time myself based on my curiosity about like a Catholic church in Bangkok and Singapore. As you can see, like these are the photos and historical documents about the Holy Rosary Church. So you can see that neo-Gothic style church in Bangkok, and then like later on 1960, like it became like a center of the Chinese community in Thailand. So you can see that it's like Gothic church with Chinese people standing and like with the missionaries Western sitting in the middle, and all the documents right below, like they were written in French, in English, and in other languages. So but one thing that like is really like kind of like make me really interested is the name of the Kiam Hua Hing, as you can see like from the postcast here. So based on this curiosity, right, when I look into the detail of like how Kim Ho actually involved with the like construction of the church, so they actually like they're involved with so many things, and you can see from the historic records, like the donation records, or even like just below the stained glass, or like within like below the monstrance. So like this Kim Ho is like was written in many places. And actually, like the Kim Ho, it was a department store in front of the church, and then like they became very rich, and were able to donate it like about like 1/3 of the construction costs to the church. That's why like so many things mentioned about this to them. Yeah, but it's not just ending that at the church in Bangkok. Later on, like when I came to Singapore, right, I kind of like expanded my research a little bit, and I've got to know that actually like the construction of the Holy Rosary Church in Bangkok, right, it was just like one of the projects that they have contributed to. And then like there are some like kind of similarities that you can see, that all the architecture is like a neo-Gothic style architecture. And as the business was like based in Bangkok, and also like they had a branch in Singapore. That's why like based on these two partners of the firm, they donated like money for the construction separately, like, and also like some churches also like a joint donation to the church construction in Bangkok and Singapore. When we look into more details about like the history of construction of these churches, and also like look into like architectural elements, you can see like actually like there are similarities that you can observe. For example, like the carved timber teak pews, like even though like all these churches, right, some of they are in Bangkok and some are in Singapore, but like one thing that you can see, that like the carved timber teak pew is what mentioned that it was produced and carved from Bangkok, and it was transported to Singapore. So, but and then you cannot find this kind of like similarities of the pews anywhere else in Singapore and Bangkok, apart from the churches that they involved and donated money for. And the second thing is like the marble altars that mainly they like brought an order from France. So you can see that like there are like a set of marble altars with the kind of like similar styles and patterns that this group of people as well, that they ordered and like brought for these churches. Like these two examples are just the example that I just showed, that like when they donated money for, right, they have shown it on the architectures and architectural elements. And like there are other items as well, for example, like the stained glass windows that also like they represented themselves on that. So that's why these are like some kind of similarities, that it connects like the history, not just in a place in Bangkok or in Singapore, but it's also like telling stories about like the materials that they brought to construct this church in Asia from Europe as well. I would like to share some of the last part is about the transboundary, because like just last month that I had a chance to organize a trip to visit all these churches in Bangkok. But actually like the group of people that I brought to, right, they were like the descendants of the founders of the firm Kim Ho Hing. So basically like they were like kind of like, some of them were born and grew up in Europe. Some of them like came from Sydney, from Australia, from Singapore, and from Bangkok. But like basically like, you know, like actually most of them never been to all these churches before, but somehow because of like the connections and like the history of the families, and like these churches has kind of like a really meaningful and impact to their families. And it's also not just for their family, but it's to other people as well, that like like you can learn about the history of these churches more from them as well. Yeah, so I would like to share that, like, when we talk about religious heritage, right? If we think about the religious heritage as a heritage, it's kind of like the tangible heritage there. But when we think about another layer of the religious heritage, somehow it can also like be very meaningful to some people from other places that might not ever been like ever like visited those places before as well. Yeah, that's the kind of like the end of the short talk of the project I'm doing on. Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Arpichat. It was very interesting, especially to see Asian heritage and Asian religious heritage on a talk which is organized by two European organizations. It's very refreshing to know that you have found these comparative analysis of a religious heritage between Asian places as well as its comparison to similarities in Europe. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Now moving on to our next speaker, Anki is a co-founder of De Kerk der Nivas, a foundation focused on stimulating public uses for religious heritage. Together with religious communities and cultural partners, she also develops projects that invite new audiences to enter religious buildings and include them in future roles in an increasingly secular society. So let's hear more about her work.
Thank you very much, Samida. I'm very happy to be here and to be able to present my organization and my main project today. I will start by sharing my screen for the presentation. All right, so, well, I was already perfectly introduced, so I will skip that and move on to tell you more about the organization that I run with my two co-founders. This is an organization that has existed since 2018 now. With the context of the Netherlands becoming more and more secular, and as you can see in this news article, 1 in 5 churches in the Netherlands is no longer a house of worship, and the estimations are that in the next decades a lot of church buildings will become vacant, and that their religious communities are shrinking, and this is a reality that we live in right now. And together with my co-founders Sander and Stefan, we thought that these spaces and these buildings, they have a special value for people, even people that are not religious, and that we would like to actively work on seeing that these buildings have a public use in the future as well. So this is the context in which we created the Kerkvenue as a foundation, with the aim to create meaningful, open and society-oriented uses for future-proof, I'm tripping over my words, church buildings in the Netherlands. So our focal points, first of all, to rejuvenate and broaden and strengthen networks around church buildings, including church buildings that are still in use as religious spaces. Secondly, to involve young people in religious heritage participation, because especially a lot of young people in the Netherlands have not been brought up with religion and are not religious themselves. But still, they will be the future custodians of these buildings. So it is very important to include these in the discussion on the future of religious heritage. Thirdly, to stimulate innovation in the organization around church buildings. So, for example, looking at the question, how can you maybe attract more volunteers in different ways and restructure your organization so that the organization is rejuvenated as well, or innovation in programming. So how can you attract new audiences by creating new cultural or social events in a religious space. Also, another focal point is to focus on modern, youthful and positive communication, because a lot of church buildings and organizations behind churches are run by mainly older communities, which means that often they don't have that many knowledge on how to use social media in a smart way, or how to present the events that they do in a way in which that can attract other audiences than the usual. And lastly, to focus on inclusive and multifunctional places for everyone. So we would also like to lower the threshold for people to enter religious buildings, because especially the gap between secular and religious communities in the Netherlands is very much present. So these are the focal points that we apply in all of our projects. And to show you as well who we are, here you see a picture of the three founders of the Kerkvernieuwers. We all, I think, Stefan is the only one who doesn't have his eyes closed. We are looking directly into the sun, so we also need to see when we not only find an English name, but also maybe take a new picture. But this is who we are. And now I would like to share with you briefly what we do, focusing on one of the main projects from the last years, which is called Holy Houses, Heilige Huisjes in Dutch, Holy Houses Rotterdam. And translated, the underline is space and culture in houses of worship in Rotterdam. So it's important to note that this project is not only about church buildings, but includes all kinds of houses of worship in the city. So Holy Houses Rotterdam is a project that was originated because of the new policy document that the municipality of Rotterdam created a few years ago. And the lady you see in the picture is the reason why we started this project, actually, because she is the one who was the project leader on this policy vision on religious buildings in Rotterdam. So one of the conclusions, or one of the questions actually, that came from this policy document is how can we form a bigger and interdisciplinary network around religious buildings to spark a citywide dialogue about their future? Because Rotterdam does not only cope with shrinkage of Christian religious communities, but also has, because of its history as a port city and as a diverse city, a lot of different religious communities all together in this city. So it's not only here about how can we reuse spaces that are becoming vacant, like churches, but also how can we connect different religious communities with each other and with the city itself. So the goals of Holy Houses Rotterdam was, first of all, to create more public attention for, in brackets, former houses of worship during the Rotterdam Architecture Month, because there was at that time also a big month going on, thematic month, where all these kinds of different activities were taking place in Rotterdam, focused on architecture. So we thought with this project we can kind of surf on their wave as well in terms of gaining attention. And the second goal is creating a space for cultural initiatives in religious buildings, because Rotterdam is a big city and it's also a growing city where space is getting more and more scarce. So there is a logical connection also to make between cultural initiatives. Think, for example, of a theater group that needs a space to perform, and a religious building that can be vacant multiple moments a week. So why so think about how can we combine these two needs with each other, and how can we combine organizations that need space with spaces that are up for use. So the third goal is to generate more visitors for the religious buildings through cultural activities in the context of holy houses. And lastly, to strengthen networks and improving connection to the neighborhood. So with the activities that would take place during holy houses, we would also try to facilitate the connection between the places and the neighborhood around them. So maybe a church in a certain neighborhood could collaborate with a school or a cultural institution that is also in the same neighborhood, so to foster also social cohesion in that way. So the process towards the Holy Houses Festival. It was a very, or it is a very participative project where the religious communities and the owners of these buildings are very much central to what happens during the whole week or weekend. This means that they, in fact, decide for themselves what they want to do and how they want to open their place of worship during this weekend. To facilitate this, we decided to organize bi-monthly network meetings in different religious buildings, and this way we could only also show these different buildings to each other, so that a church in a certain or a religious community in a certain neighborhood would be able to show the place where they're in and tell something about the history to all the other participants of the Holy Houses project. Secondly, a bottom-up organization of cultural activities. What I already mentioned, the religious communities themselves were in the lead of organizing social and cultural activities and in the lead of opening up their space. Thirdly, coaching, facilitation and support by the project group. The project group consisting out of me, Stefan and Sander, and also Floor and Martijn from the municipality of Rotterdam. We are the project group that helps the religious communities in organizing these activities, because some of the religious communities already have a lot of experience in organizing a cultural or social event, but other communities didn't have that experience yet. So therefore, the facilitation role that we have is very important. And last, there is also very much an emphasis on the development of concepts that are engaging the audience and also our communication, also in the house style with the colors and with the way in which we present holy houses. This is very important because in the end, we want to attract new audiences for new users of these religious spaces. And therefore, we also need to take in mind how we can communicate or how we can present the project in a way that attracts these new people. So the process looked like this. As I mentioned, a lot of meetings in different churches where we would invite all the participants with their different buildings to come together and to talk about what they would want to organize and also how we could help them organize it. We would work in small workshop settings, in small groups to help them each step of the way. In the end, this is a picture of last year. This was June 2022, which was the first edition of Holy Houses Rotterdam, where in the end we had over 40 different buildings throughout the whole city that participated. And some participated with a whole array of different cultural events, and others only participated by opening up their doors and giving, for example, a tour through their building. But this was all okay. They could all participate the way in which they want. And in the end, we had churches, we also had mosques, we had temples, and we had a synagogue. So to give you an idea of what this looked like, there were a lot of different types of events. there was classical music, there was other cultural styles of music. We had a book fair, there were exhibitions, there were activities for children as well, and also tours through the city to visit different types of churches. And this was not only a project and not only events that were organized and run by the religious communities, but also in collaboration with cultural organizations and social organizations in the city. So this is another example of one of the churches in the city. That's actually one of my favorite. This is a church that turned into a gallery and opened up their doors throughout the whole Holy Houses week in June to show their space and for the artists to show what was happening there. This was a picture taken at the opening event of Holy Houses Rotterdam, where people would be hearing through these headphones the stories of the people behind the religious community of this church, with the perspective of the future in which this church would be sold quite soon, actually. So there was a cultural organization in the city that recorded the different stories behind the religious community. So also, of course, a lot of music, because religious spaces are also very suitable to organize musical events in. So this is one of the many examples of a concert in a church that was also very well visited during that weekend. This is an example of also bridging religious communities and the secular society in the city. This was a picture taken in an exhibition space where there was an exhibition on future and public uses of church buildings, with a lot of different examples of churches that have been redeveloped in the Netherlands. And you see here also the monks of the monastery attached to the church that were able to view this exhibition. So the last point I want to make as I conclude my talk about the Holy Houses project is that one of the biggest challenges is to involve young people in this project as well. And one of the steps we want to take this year is to work together with a school, the Hogeschool Utrecht. And we work together with the students of the school, and they are going to do research in the neighborhoods of Rotterdam and interview young people on the street about what they think of religious heritage, about what they think of churches and other types of buildings, and how they would like to, if they would have the chance to do something in this kind of space, what would that look like, and how would this be? So this is one of the efforts that we are making to engage young people, also to get more information about how young people want to be engaged, because this is also very important. Well, we hope that for the next couple of years we can continue with this project and continue with connecting secular audiences and young audiences with religious communities and religious spaces. So I'm going to stop right now because I think I'm already a little bit over time. I apologize for that. But if you want to see more about this project, you can scan this QR code to see the short documentary that we make, and I will also put it into the chat, a link of it. So I will stop sharing my screen and we'll give the floor back to Samida.
Thank you so much, Anki. It was really very interesting to see your work that you are doing in Netherlands. I know being part of FRH network, I myself have seen few members working in Netherlands, but now I think FRH could say that we have a friend in you and your foundation who works towards a religious heritage, and especially working with community, which is a very key aspect nowadays, at least in terms of sustainability. So yeah, thank you so much again. Now moving on to the last presentation for today. Eva is a researcher and a curator from Netherlands, currently based in Rotterdam. She takes part in the development of programs and exhibitions at the Grote Kerk Breda, which is the Great Church of Breda in Netherlands. As a contemporary art curator at a religious heritage site, she focuses on the practice of trans-historical curating. In addition, she also conducts research on interdisciplinary forum festival, collective memory, and socio-political role of the archive. So thank you again to Anki, and now I give floor to Eva.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to talk about my job as a junior curator in a church. And in this presentation, I will actually mainly focus also on that role as a junior art curator in the Great Church of Breda, but also our policy transformation. And in doing so, I will talk about the theoretical framework of trans-historical curating and also the idea of innovative heritage. And I will end this presentation with some recent examples of trans-historical exhibitions that we made, and also give a sneak preview of a new digital product that we are designing to really actively immerse our visitors in the narratives that are present in this church. So in 2020, Marieke Wiegel was appointed as director of the Great Church, and she was tasked to work on professionalization of the church and also its position within the cultural sector of Breda, but also in the Netherlands. As for your information, up until that moment, the church was actually registered mainly as event location and not as a heritage site. Whereas this church is actually classified as a national monument by the Ministry of Culture. So I joined the church in September 2020, back then as an intern. And that's actually when we started carrying out this new cultural profile with two key policy concepts, namely creating and maintaining a place of connection in the heart of the city. And the church physically finds itself in the heart of Breda, and a lot of Breda citizens, they also attribute meaning to the building, and is often used as a symbol to affirm, well, the city's identity. But well, yeah, they hardly visit the church regularly. So for us, it's really important that our program makes people from Breda and of course also outside of the city curious to explore the building from the inside and really engage in the programs that we organize. And the second key concept is reflecting the value of the past in the present. So this church has quite a remarkable history, and it's acquainted and very prestigious status in the 16th century, while the House of Nassau, which is the ancestors of the Dutch royal family now, when they ruled over Breda. And high quality craftsmen were brought to Breda to work on this monument, on its frescoes, on its sculptures and its architecture. And now that the building is finding itself in a decade-long restoration process, we really see it as our task to reflect the quality of this church, arts and historical importance into our contemporary programs. Short historical background of this church. It's the existence of a church on the location of the Great Church dates back to 1269, as we found in a written document. And from 1303, the House of Nassau settles in Breda. I fast forward to 16th century. That's when Hendrik III of Nassau aims to really bring grandeur to this church, and he commissions the Prince Chapel. He commissions many fresco paintings from painters from Spain and Italy. Then, well, what follows is the inevitable iconoclast. It hits this church also very hard, leaves traces that are still visible. And in the following century, Breda and subsequently the church, they shift in dominant faith from Catholic to Protestant. And it becomes, well, definitely Protestant in 1637. And this is also the moment where all these colorful frescoes are being covered under white plaster. And eventually the building starts to decay. Restorations are needed and are starting. One that is one to mention is the restoration led by Kuipers, who's also architect of Rijksmuseum and the Amsterdam Central Station. And only in the 1990s, the plaster from the inside is being removed, and the frescoes appear again. And now a new round of restoration is in which we are finding ourselves right now on the exterior of the church, which will last until probably 2027. And as you can see here, this is an action picture of current restoration with quite innovative technology. Here you see a robot working on cutting the limestone that is coming from Portland and used for the exterior of the church. And this restoration is a huge project. It's also partly financed by the Ministry of Culture, which also again stresses the importance of this monument. But at the same time, as Ankie already mentioned, city churches in the Netherlands are finding themselves in some sort of an identity crisis, because what research shows is that there is a decrease in religion in the Netherlands and subsequently also in religious use of churches. And what we can detect here is that churches are shifting in that. There's an increase of cultural use. So in that sense, religious heritage is really challenged to reinvent itself. And in the Netherlands, you can also see that that shift to this idea of innovative heritage in the way that projects that relate to this new innovative heritage are being financed. Because they're not only financed now by heritage-related funds, but also national and visual art-based funds. And it's also because of that policy shift that, for example, my role as a junior curator is made possible. So now, how do we begin to give meaning to this idea of innovative heritage within our program of the Great Church? Well, as I explained in the introduction, we strive for creating a program that reflects the quality of the church and that is also socially relevant. Really a program that uses the church as a stage, but also as a starting point to talk about issues that are prevalent in today's society. So to make the church into a place where people from different backgrounds, but also different perspectives can come together. And we really aim to highlight the historical stories present in the church, which can be deducted from the many monuments and objects that together with the building itself really form the collection. And as this monument has withstood the passage of time and many historical events and phenomena, it is full of different stories, also from these different perspectives. And it's precisely this polyphonic narrative construction that we want to present to our visitors, and thereby also creating room to allow for new or even for neglected stories and perspectives. And lastly, and this is mainly an incentive and prerequisite for our exhibition program, is that we want to connect the contemporary imagination to the imagination of the past. So by doing that, the church really steps away from the idea of a Kunsthalle. So, you know, a place where well, just art is shown and the context doesn't really play a role. So we really clearly see the church not as a white cube. And for us, it's really important that this artistic perspective is always somehow connected to the narratives that are present in the church. And this is also where the idea of transhistorical curating comes in. And my role as a transhistorical art curator. So the idea of transhistorical curating is not something new, but the practice is not yet omnipresent in the curatorial field. So this is also an interesting, I think, overlap between museum studies and heritage sector. And an important moment of theoretical exchange within this niche was with the publication of transhistorical curating. And I really base my own idea of what transhistorical curating should be on this quote by Eva Wittok, where a diverse range, transhistorical curating is seen as a diverse range of curatorial efforts in which objects and artifacts from various periods in art historical and cultural context are combined in display in order to question and expand traditional museological notions like chronology, context, and category. So to give you an example of how we put that into practice, I want to show you an example of the Space to Breathe exhibition. This is an exhibition we made together with Nusha Tavakolian, who is an Iranian magnum photographer. And we attempted to connect themes that are present in the photographs to the themes that are present in the church. And here you see photographs of British war photographer Tim Hetherington. And this series is called Sleeping Soldiers, for which he photographed American soldiers in Afghanistan. And he photographed them in, their most vulnerable moments in an attempt to show also the tenderness and the human aspect of these sometimes also very young men and boys. And in doing so, he really wanted to comment on, American propagandic and ultra-masculine depiction of soldiers, as well as showing that these men are also victims of a very violent system. And next to Hetherington, we curated the work of Saba Alizadeh, as an Iranian photographer, and he projected violent imagery of martyrs from the Iran-Iraq war in the setting of homes. And these images of martyrs in Iran, they are present in public spaces, so which also takes away the privacy of mourning for the martyrs' relatives. So by projecting these images back in these home settings, he was literally bringing these young boys back home. So like Hetherington, Saba Alizadeh is also focusing on this human aspect and the aspect of mourning, commemoration, and putting them next to each other is, of course, also interesting from a geopolitical context, whereas, the United States and Iran are not really on best terms. Whereas these both photographers are really showing this human aspect in both of these projects. And we decided to curate this in the north side of the church, which is actually always a place for commemorating death, as the place where the sun never hits the niche. So there we really try to make the projects fit within the space in the church. Another example in the same exhibition is in the Prince Chapel. You see a work here by Nusha Tavakolian, and you see the monument for Engelbrecht II and his wife. They are depicted in a state of trance, so they are going to the heaven, like from the earthly to the heavenly, and the way their body is depicted is very physical, bodily depiction. And in the photograph is coming from the series called For the Sake of Calmness, in which Nusha Tavakolian is investigating PMS, premenstrual syndrome, and using that as a symbol to talk also about Iran. So also that very bodily aspect is present. And if you look closely, you see that also the feet on the picture and the feet in the monument have some sort of visual rhyme to it. Next example is again a work by Nusha Tavakolian. The work is titled Listen, and it showcases 6 videos of Iranian female opera singers. And in Iran, there is Sharia law, and in Sharia law, it's forbidden for women to sing in public spaces. And Nusha invited these 6 opera singers to come to a private studio in Tehran, and she was recording them while they were singing for an imagined audience. And she cut away the sound. So as a visitor, you are confronted with these moving images without a sound. So the women are silenced. And she also used this work as a metaphor to talk about position of women in Iran. And we curated this work in the Chapel of Mary, which became an empty chapel after the church became predominantly Protestant. And in addition, this church also used to be called, Church of Our Lady. And this devotion to Mary as a mother of Christ was being also, kind of swept away by this change in religion. And also this gaping hole on the wall is also a reference to an altar that once was there, but is now a memory. Another example is the work of Nepalese photographer Uma Bista, and she comments on the psychological female trauma of young girls that need to undergo this tradition in which women need to be excluded when they're on their period. We put that in the birth chapel, also to make people think about ideas of fertility, of cycles. This was also a place where, when we were giving tours, a lot of people felt the need to share something that reminded them of this series. So it also became a kind of a stage to talk. Another exhibition that we did was with fashion designer Matthijs van Bergen, who created new designs in which he was also inspired by works in the church. So here you see a design which he made where he made an armor for a pregnant woman, based on the stories of women in the church, but also the armor that you saw in the Prince Chapel. And here are some of his other designs where he, for example, also focused on the gold leaf that is very much present in the church as well. Currently, we're working on a new project, which is called House of Narratives. And let's say it's our permanent collection display, but then in an innovative and interactive style. And we're planning to create a digital platform or an app that will host a database of stories related to the church in relation to present day. And these stories will be multivocal. They will be told by different voices and in multimedia. So in podcasts or videos. We're gonna curate this amorphous mass of stories in 7 different menus, which for us is a metaphor related to the idea of a Burgundian buffet. Menus have different topics, but can be mixed or matched, like you do in a restaurant. You can choose, for example, vegetarian menu or chef's menu. And likewise, we have a ladies menu or a sustainability menu or a fast food menu in which you get the highlights of the church in 30 minutes. And then we have this idea of the +1 menu where visitors can actually tell their stories to us. So this is for us a way to really also get the stories from the people itself. The narratives in these menus will be updated when necessary, just like a menu in a restaurant. And in addition, we will connect the stories of the church to present day examples where similar themes are relevant. And this is also where the transhistorical curating comes into place. And these stories will not be told by a single narrator, but instead by various people with various backgrounds. And by opening up this database for the +1 menu, we allow also for a really interactive and inclusive approach that will make it possible for everyone to contribute to a collective cultural archive connected to this religious heritage site. And for that, we will work with agency Intien. They're based in Rotterdam, and they are very well known for their apps that they make for other cultural organizations like the Photo Museum or the Boijmans Depot, also New York Public Library and the Anne Frank House. So this project is still at its beginning, and it's planned to go into a testing phase next spring 2024. So thank you for your attention. And then if you have any remaining questions about our policy program and shift, please email me if you want. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Eva. It was a really interesting project, and I can only imagine how interesting it must be working at the religious site itself. That to such an interesting site. I saw a pattern in all three presentations that one talked about transboundary, one talked about community, and one talked about transhistorical initiatives. And I think FRH and its upcoming conference on sustainability and religious heritage, I think all these three key elements are going to be very useful to be discussed in that conference as well. Now, I think after all these three presentations, I know that everybody would be more curious to know more about their work. So I have prepared a few follow-up questions, one each to ask them, and then maybe they can ask in the same order as I question them. So my first question is to Arpichat. You talked about the transboundary aspect of religious heritage. So how do you think it helped you in your research? Like, do you often compare aspects of Asian and European religious heritage? And if yes, how?
Yeah, thank you so much for your question. So like, basically like my interest, right, is like basically like, actually like how we think about transboundary, it helps me a lot on you know, like, because the starting point of my research actually is I'm just curious about actually what is the history of my church community where I grew up. But the thing is, like, when I did study more in the historical documents and also like getting to talk to more people, so I understand more. And like when I went to study in Europe, and like when I went to like archives in Europe, I also like found more stories about the church, about my church, or even like other churches that related to the church. Because like when we talk about church, right, it's not the standalone organization. Actually, it's like the organization that connects to each other. And especially in the past, the connection was so strong. So therefore, like they didn't like really separate. And even like, especially like all the churches were kind of like led by like missionaries from Europe. So this kind of connection actually, like when you kind of like zoom out a little bit, you can actually understand a lot more in like a big picture. Yeah. For example, like I found like a letter in the archive in Paris mentioning about like the first organ of my church in Bangkok, but it was kept in Paris. Or even like some stories about the stained glass window in Singapore, right? So it was kept at the Kadok archive in Leuven. So like somehow like when you did research in your own country, you might not really like understand much, even though like you have like a baseline, like a historic course already. But when you talk to people, when you did research more and like go to places, you understand more. So that's why I think that like it really helps a lot. Yeah, on this all the stories. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think your research and your thoughts on transboundary aspect would surely help our audience to, do research on their own or search about their own religious heritage and communities that they come from. Now, my second question is to Anki. Anki, you talked about thinking of community engagement and taking of it into next level in your upcoming initiatives. So in terms of opening spaces for youth, whether it's going to be for social activities or festivities, how do you think young members of the community can contribute towards this shared goal?
So I think for a young person, and also perhaps if you are secular, the trick in working together with churches and with religious communities is to find common ground and shared values to base your cooperation upon. Because often religious communities are older of age, and they will have a different perspective on what a social or cultural event in a church building should look like. And on the other hand, young people who are interested in working on cultural events in these buildings. They can have also maybe presumptions on what a religious community member would think of their ideas. But I am convinced that young people have a lot to offer when it comes to new and public uses of religious buildings, in their enthusiasm and in their knowledge also of, for example, social media, and in their ability to connect with people from their own age. But to be able to really work together, having the right attitude is really key. To stay open-minded, not to have too much presumptions, and to find common ground. And on the other hand, owners of religious spaces and religious communities themselves, if they really want to engage young people, they should also be willing to give young people the trust that they can create something and contribute something really valuable. So in the end, it's also about this two-way street of collaboration.
Yeah. I think what you talk about is really important, and especially Netherlands being a key country where the community and the secular and religious communities are shrinking, then that is the way to go. And I really wish you the best for your initiatives. Now, my next question is to Eva. So you talked about spiritual sustainability by envisioning religious heritage as a platform for culture, art, and knowledge transfer. So in your experience, when you even talked about your stories that you allow you to share, what is your experience, and what do you think, how can young people also contribute towards these exhibitions or policies or anything? Like, the work that you are doing seems very interesting. So how do you think young people can help towards that?
Well, I think, of course, first of all, to participate, to come to the church and to participate in these programs. But I think, I kind of agree with what Anke was saying. I think it also works. It works two ways. So I think that heritage professionals also have the responsibility to take other stakeholders, and especially a young generation, into account when they are making these new policy plans. And this is also something that I that I really believe in. In our plan, we also use these words of inclusive and diversity, and they should not stay empty words, but they should actually really, they should be followed by action. So to circle back your question again, I think in a very pragmatic way, for young people in heritage or students, also make known to these organizations that you want to help out. And for example, in my case, I really reached out to the church that I wanted to work with them, and I was not applying for a job opening that was already there. I was just letting the director know that I want to help out, and I have this background in curating. And together we actually looked for a fund to keep me on board. So I think there is also some initiative that young people need to show. And then from the side of the heritage professionals currently working, there needs to be trust, and they should also give these young people a chance to collaborate on this.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think especially with the recent year of youth, European Year of Youth, I think the youth got the chance to at least express their opinions and get involved in more activities in heritage, whether they belong to the heritage community, like heritage experts and heritage professionals or not. But still, I think it helped them a lot, to some extent at least, to voice and to have an opportunity to have a platform. Many EU organizations did multiple initiatives, just like FRH and ESACH as well. So I think we have paved the way, and now the only remaining thing is to just take the chance and collaborate and talk with each other and connect. So yeah, thank you so much for that as well. Now I give the floor to the audience. As said, anyone who has questions can either raise their hand and participate directly, or if you prefer, you can just write it in the chat as well. Do we have any questions? Feel free to ask. I could see in the chat, I think so. Yeah, okay, somebody. Yana? Yeah.
Hello, everyone. First, I would like to thank on behalf of ESACH Talks for all your great presentations and all the great insight you have given us in this little talk we had today. It's more of a comment than rather a question, and I would like to say that I think the essential problem, as also Miruna has pointed out here in the chat, I also come from a country that is very religious, especially in Christian Orthodoxy. So religious heritage plays a very crucial role, not only in national identity, but in the community itself. And it's something young people are not very willing to engage with because they are actually connecting it to religion, something that we really want to secularize apart from the state. But I think what's important in engaging young people is to explain to them that sometimes, I mean, that's the art historian approach in me, that religious heritage is not only religious, we also have to look at it as art. So regardless of the fact that it's a religious character, we have to take into its artistic pursuits that it has and what it has to offer as a witness of another time. And I think that showing that churches were something more also of anthropological nature rather than only religious in those terms is something very important for engaging the young people in the community. And I think especially what was Eva talking about is something what she has done for all I see is very visually appealing to young people, seeing those kind of transitions that happen within a church that we consider a very traditional place, something new and something innovative, something more appealing to young people that makes them engage more. So great congratulations, Eva, on everything you have done at Breda. And I think it's a great initiative, and I wish to see it have a great echo at other places and among other professionals. So here I see that I think there are a little bit of other questions, so I will let others have the floor.
Yeah, I think there is one question. I can see multiple questions and multiple people raising hands. So I'll just ask with the chronological order. Lee Si Ping has question for Arpichat. He says your discovery on the churches in Bangkok and Singapore is very interesting. You shared about the similarity between the churches as they were built by the same construction company. And he was wondering if there were any differences between the church designs and perhaps any context between Bangkok versus Singapore.
Thank you for the question. I mean, like, it's a good question which requires a lot of research to answer. I mean, like, when we look at the appearance of the building, right, we kind of like roughly know that like there are like a trends that they have like they use only like a single spire for building like churches in the same period, and it's like a trend that like like you can see some similarities when you perceive them, but like when you really like study into the historical documents, right, you kind of like know that they were designed with different architects and with different priests, and so like I would say that it requires more study, like in-depth study in this to be able to conclude with some summary that like are there or not. But from the physical appearance, we may think that somehow they're related. Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much. I think Anthony also raised his hand. After that, maybe I can ask Carlota's question and then Lillian can have the floor later. So yeah, Anthony.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I represent DevTech. Actually, in the future, DevTech can give a popularization of innovative heritage, as Eva said. And so in my case, it's interesting to know the balancing of stakeholders. I mean, here is religious buildings, communities around them, government. So how can we balance, like, how can we balance all sides? Can you understand my question? It's I mean, like there are so many interests and like intersections. You can't do anything systematically because like everybody has their own back plan. So,
Yeah,
for
I
example,
think
this
Eva
question,
and Anki are
yeah,
the perfect people to answer, but Anki has left due to prior commitments. So I think Eva can also answer, considering she also works with community.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question. And I think this is really one of the biggest issues when you are working on a project where you want to give a building like this a new, or not even new, but a relevant meaning. Well, I have, in a way, the luck that we work with a very small team, and the way that, for example, the church that I'm working is so so much in the heart of this city that everyone has an opinion about it. And because we work with a lot of volunteers who are, all from around, and we take them very serious. So we talk with them a lot, and before and after each exhibition, I take time to talk to them to see, okay, did you like what was going on? How do you feel about it? What were the comments that you got from people visiting the church? I have, for example, set up a very small questionnaire on a tablet, which is at the entrance of the church. So when people leave, they can actually fill in this questionnaire about how they think about the program and the church, and if they have any comments. We also have this guest book for some people that that they don't want to do anything with tablets, but they write. A lot of people write in guest books. It's something I didn't expect, but we find a lot of comments in there as well. And if people are, for example, angry with the program that we did, they write it down, and we notice that's also how we get these responses, and we try for our next programs to take those things into account. And I think with what we are doing in this new program with this app, let's say, we don't know if it's going to be an app, but it's going to be something digital, where we have this +1 menu where people can actually add something to the narratives and to this database of narratives of the church. I think that will also help us to see, okay, what are all these different voices? Who are our stakeholders? And I think that's that's at least from the perspective of the church where I'm working, how we are going to do that. How are we going to face that problem of taking into account all these different voices?
So maybe for the case specific thing that you are working on, instead of having middlemen to discuss communities issues, you directly prefer working with the community and getting their feedback, which helped you a lot in making decisions and working on projects, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. The next question is from Carlota. She was asking you, Eva, if you have ever faced any backlash on your very groundbreaking curating and the work that you are doing in an environment associated with a little bit of conservatism.
Yeah, well, to have two answers to that. First, yes. There's some, like, maybe 1 or 2 people, they always write down something like, oh my God, in God's house, how can you do this? So yes, you have those people. But on the other hand, we also see, and that's also the majority of people that are not used to go to museums because, they just don't do that. It's not part of their life. And they walk into the church, they see an exhibition, and their first reaction is sometimes like, oh, really? But then, we tell them like, no, yeah, have a look, just try. And then they always come back very pleasantly surprised, and they really liked what they saw. And they even come to us to talk about it. Like, whoa, I thought it was really cool. And so I think, there are like these both extremes, which I really like. So it's also good. Also,
I believe that the kind of exhibitions that you have held till now, even the people who are a little bit conservative would at least take a look at the exhibitions, and they are so thought-provoking that even some kind of curiosity would start in their mind as well to at least start the dialogue. So even though there would be some kind of backlash, at least they will start a dialogue and talk about it, and maybe more people will listen. And then, I think that itself can also create create some kind of promotion of the work that you are doing, and yeah, I think that could also help. Now I saw that Lillian also wanted to discuss. Also, I would like to thank Lillian because while Eva and Anki were speaking, she was informing everyone in the chat about Netherlands and religious heritage in Netherlands. So Lillian, you have the floor.
That's because I'm old. I'm the only elder one in this room, and this is very good for me to see. I'm the president of the advisory board of FRH, and it is so good to see to have many young people online sharing their knowledge and experiences in the context of religious heritage. And thank you, Samida, for your excellent guidance for the discussion. When we started in 2009, we would have never have imagined that we could facilitate these kinds of discussions, and we did. All three presentations were different and very interesting, in my opinion. I work in the field of religious heritage already over 20 years. Eva, excellent exhibitions, very impressive pictures. Feel invited to contribute to the next year's photo competition, because I'm sure they will be highlighted. They were amazing. Also, I just wanted to thank everybody for giving your time and seeing so many different country backgrounds, students from all over the world. This is exactly the reason, Samida, that I gave a little bit of context, because I noticed that there were so many different people, and sometimes you forget that the situation in every country in the field of religious heritage is very, very different. Ownership, reflections, belief, everything. And for people from other countries, well, we do have FRH Inform for all of you to know. It's a booklet, it's on the website. It's a research, it's just a quick research, because there's so much in depth to learn and to know for the future. But go and have a look there. And I really, really hope to see many, but at least some of you in Lund, because it would be very interesting also for you to see the elder experts in the field, but surely also the other way around. I was very inspired by all your thoughts and sharing. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lillian. Actually, Roshi, I was about to say that you can share the link of the inform sheets. It's a great project which gives you at least the basic ideas of how religious heritage works in every single country of Europe. And multiple experts from all over the Europe have contributed to it. And it's still a work in progress. We always keep on updating the information. So it's a great way to start getting to know about all the religious heritages from all over the Europe. So again, I would like to thank everybody. I'm guessing that there are no more questions, if I'm correct. If there are any questions, then I can wait a minute and then maybe no. Okay. So thank you all again. I think this concludes our question answer session for today. And if you have any more questions, comments, or feedback, please do not hesitate to write to us on all the media channels. Of course, to FRH also, Rosha is here with us, Lillian is here with us. So everybody is open to have an open dialogue and share thoughts among each other. So yeah, I would just again like to thank all our panelists for making this event possible and for sharing their experiences with all of us. And I hope you enjoyed the event. We look forward to seeing you again in our next talk. So I wish you all the best and have a good night.